Hi everyone, welcome to Sunny Day Discussions. I am Sunny Day. Now I know there's been a lot in the media about the whole documents saga that Biden is not going to be prosecuted, and I hear a lot of people in conservative media being like, well, it's not fair, it's a two-tiered system of justice. Obviously, our justice system has it in for Republicans and gives Democrats free passes because they did basically the same thing. Well, that's just not the case. There's a huge difference between the two cases, and even Mike Pence. Yes, both Biden and Trump took classified documents. The difference between the two, though, is behaviors and how they handled it. Now, Biden turned over the classified documents as soon as they were discovered. He cooperated with the National Archives and the DOJ. He consented to searches of multiple different locations and voluntarily sat down for an interview. Trump, on the other hand, the National Archives tried for about a year, to get these documents back, and he wouldn't do it. He actually even actively obstructed justice, and he enlisted others to lie and to destroy evidence. If Trump had just handed over the documents to NARA, the National Archives, he wouldn't be going through this legal proceeding right now. He would be fine. But because he wanted to hold on to these documents, he violated the law. He broke the law. And this is on him. He brought this on himself. So, in order to prove a crime, you have to establish whether the unauthorized retention of classified documents was willful. Staff members packed the boxes, so it's completely reasonable to assume that these people that took the classified documents didn't know about them. They could have easily just been caught in the jumble. And there's a whole discussion to be had about how White House handles classified documents, how our government handles classified documents. But it needed to be proven that Trump and Biden knew they had possessed these items and didn't give them over. There was substantial evidence indicating Trump knew what he had and failed to return them, even after being subpoenaed. There is very little evidence that Biden knew what he had. Trump had several hundred classified documents, along with thousands of unclassified documents and photos. NARA, after a lot of effort, was authorized to retrieve 15 boxes in the year 2022, in early 2022, in which it discovered 197 classified files. An FBI search of Mar-a-Lago returned another 102 classified documents. The topics included intelligence briefings about various countries, including numerous documents on military matters, one about a country's nuclear capabilities, and a contingency plan for attacking Iraq. In contrast, Biden had about 50 files, mostly involving the Afghanistan war. They were either marked as classified or were later determined to be classified documents. Trump's files were found in a locked storage room, as well as drawers in his office, stacked in a bathroom, and on the stage of a ballroom. Biden's files were stored in a closet of an office suite at the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement. It was basically a political think tank. I had heard also that there were some in his garage or something like that, but I can't verify that. Oh no, yes I can. Never mind, sorry. The most important documents were found in a box in his garage. So Trump has an audio recording of him showing visitors classified documents. Biden has an audio recording of him talking with his ghostwriter about a memoir in regards to his son, Beau. And when he was reading out of his notes, his journals, I guess you would say, from when he was in office. And he couldn't read a word that he had written, so he kind of showed the ghostwriter, and he was like, be careful now, some of this might be classified, I don't know. Probably shouldn't have showed it to him anyway, but so the difference is there. Well, neither of them should have taken those documents, should have had any documents. And we obviously need to revamp the system of how to handle classified documents. Trump's claims that he had presidential, whatever, the Presidential Records Act that protected him from this. And he tells you that the Presidential Records Act made it to where he could declassify anything he wanted. He could take whatever he wanted, any paperwork, and keep it. That's not the case. In fact, it's the exact opposite. The Presidential Records Act states that there is a process that you have to follow in order to declassify these documents. And that you cannot just take these documents with you. They don't belong to the former president. They belong to the government and the National Archives. So he was not he did not have the right to do what he did. And he made it worse on himself by willfully retaining these documents and refusing to turn them over and actively obstructing. Like I said, that he actively obstructed turning these over, and there is still suspicion that he has even more classified documents. They just found a locked room that apparently the FBI didn't deem necessary to search when they went in. So who knows, maybe they'll get another warrant to go in and search that room to find these missing classified documents that they still need. But who's to say? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen there. Now, I also wanted to mention that it's very interesting, the fact that Trump likes to call Democrats fascists, Marxists, communists, all that kind of stuff as a slam, right? However, he salivates over autocratic dictators. He loves them. So he uses fascism as a slam against Democrats while openly embracing autocrats who have fascist tendencies. Makes no sense, but nothing he says makes sense, especially not anymore. So, first off, fascism and Marxism are opposing ideologies. That's to start. Trump idolizes foreign leaders who are fascist or fascist-leaning. He definitely loves autocrats and sees them as strong leaders to be admired, all the while ignoring the fascist tendencies of his Republican Party. Now, the evidence of GOP fascism is pretty upfront, and I know many will argue the definition of fascism, whether they really fall under it, but here, let's go over some of this. So, number one, the rejection of democracy, the rule of law, and equal rights under the law in favor of a strong man. So, denial of election results, claiming valid prosecutions are politically motivated, and witch hunts. Right, there's the first example. The law is working, and he just doesn't like to be held accountable. So, of course, he's trying to throw the laws to the side. And he's convincing a bunch of people, all of his sycophants and cult members, that he's innocent and it's just a political persecution. And then the denial of the election. He just can't grasp, and neither can his supporters, that he's not popular. People don't like Donald Trump. I'm sorry, they don't. Now, number two, galvanizing of popular rage against cultural elites. They stir up grievances against people for supposedly displacing average people, and they encourage violence. hatred against migrants, convincing people that they're coming to replace us. They're coming for your jobs. They're all criminals. They're coming from insane asylums and prisons and on and on and on. Transgender people, they're all groomers. You know, that's how they rile up their support, because they stoke that fear, and that fear becomes hatred. All right, so nationalism. Based on a dominant superior race or religion, they glorify the state and want to dominate other nations. Fascists believe schools and universities must teach values that extol the dominant race, religion, and bloodline. Fascists worry about disloyalty and sabotage. So here's some quotes from Trump that kind of coincide with that. In 2015, he said, "Tremendous infectious disease is pouring across the border." In 2019, he said, "Jewish people that vote for a Democrat show great disloyalty." In 22, "Getting critical race theory out of our schools is a matter of national survival." In 2023, "Immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country." Now, number 4, extolling brute strength and heroic warriors. Fascism depends on bullying. For the fascist, war and violence are a means of strengthening society by destroying the weak. And quotes from Trump in 2021, "You'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong." And in 2023, "I am your warrior." Number 5, disdain of women and fear of non-standard gender identities or sexual orientation. Fascism is organized around male dominance and seeks to eliminate homosexuality, transgender, and queer people because they are thought to weaken or challenge the heroic male warrior. And more quotes from Trump. In 1992, "You have to treat them like shit, women." In 2002, "When you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything." Nuh-uh. In 2023, "I will promote positive education about the nuclear family." So it's quite frightening that the GOP is leaning into this, and they're openly embracing it. In a national poll, 42% of Republicans identify as MAGA conservatives. That is almost half of the GOP hear Trump's fascist rhetoric and are on board. These Americans who believe that they should forever be on top of the social and political order because their race or religion, and they are pissed at society for daring to try to give equal rights to those who do not fall into the correct category of race or religion, meaning anyone who's not straight, white, cis, male. One party is dedicated to a dictatorship that will drain the swamp, or enemies destroying the nation from within. That's the Republican Party. They're constantly talking about draining the swamp, even though they are the swamp. As Americans, we are arrogant enough to believe it will never happen to us, and ignorant enough to not realize that it is happening right now, particularly in red states. We need to open our eyes. So, not only is the GOP out to destroy women's rights, trans rights, rights of people of color, rights of immigrants, they have a history of defunding programs that help people and then going, "See, they don't work. So now we have to just cancel them." And one big example of that is education. So the Department of Education was created under Jimmy Carter, and it began operating in May of 1980, the year I was born. Since then, GOP politicians have been fighting to defund it. Ronald Reagan actually ran on abolishing the Department of Education. However, in a 1983 report, A Nation at Risk, sounded the alarm about the quality of American schools. The educational foundation, or quote, the educational foundations of our society are presently being eroded by a rising tide of mediocrity that threatens our very future as a nation and as a people. This report secured the future of the Department of Education, even though Reagan promised to abolish it in his campaign. But it created a narrative of failure. And it led to a generational cycle of blaming and underpaying teachers. Claims of teachers being lazy, and they had their summers free so they didn't have to work very hard. Teachers' unions were blamed for a lot of this. Conservative think tanks began to demand a get tough approach to teachers and students. This brought us Bush's No Child Left Behind, a law that compelled states to test students annually in maths and reading and sanction schools that failed to meet the targets. This was a culture of no excuses, no matter how poor the kids, no excuses for the teachers if they can't bump up the test scores. The other part of Bush's solution was opening the way for charter schools. Those are public schools that are ran by outside groups. And in certain places, charter schools are excellent because they get more funding than normal public schools, like in small, tiny communities. But those charter schools then hired untrained teachers on the cheap. Most of the time, they were typically college graduates who were willing to do this for a couple of years before moving on to their actual career goals or going to graduate school or something like that. It deprofessionalized teaching because it implied that anyone could teach if they could do, and they could do it especially if they were smart and went to Ivy League schools. Charter schools were non-union for the most part, and if they had problems with kids, they could just kick them out and send them to the regular public school, which made public school teachers have that much more work. In 2004, then Education Secretary Roderick Page described the National Education Association, the country's biggest teachers union, as a terrorist organization for opposing No Child Left Behind. Reagan had an approach of trying to break up unions and pushing for tax cuts and deregulation. In Wisconsin in 2011, then Governor Scott Walker passed Act 10. This decimated the teachers' unions, and it ended up with huge cuts in teachers' pay and benefits. Other states such as Indiana, Massachusetts, and Ohio weakened teachers' collective bargaining rights as well. Even Obama failed to turn the situation around. In 2009, he said, "It's time to start rewarding good teachers and stop making excuses for the bad ones." Obama had a Race to the Top initiative. It offered $4.35 billion to hard-up states to embrace policies such as expanding charter schools and linking test scores to teacher evaluations. This was a terrible idea, absolutely terrible, because it made teaching about teaching to the test. And using test scores over teacher judgment, to how to teach the individual child. And it completely ignored the needs of the students. Some students need more work, more time put into learning than others. And in 2008, 2009, when the financial crisis hit, bringing with it an excuse to cut funding and freeze teacher salaries. When the economy recovered, not everyone's salaries and benefits recovered as well. So, red states in particular prioritize tax cuts over education. And it kind of shows in the fact that most of the least educated states in this country are red. And the whole No Child Left Behind and even Obama's attempt to fix the situation made it to where teachers teach only to the test. I have lots of teachers in my family. And they hated No Child Left Behind because it made you teach to the test. And so instead of teaching critical thinking skills and using different techniques and methods and ways of teaching that help benefit each individual student, they were forced to teach to a test in order for the funding to continue at their school. And in my opinion, because they're no longer able to teach critical thinking skills, that they have this strict regimen that they have to teach, a whole generation of people have grown up lacking critical thinking skills. And critical thinking skills are so important. So important. Because then you can see through the bullshit of the internet and the bullshit of politicians. Because you can see and think, hey, that doesn't quite make sense. Let me look into that a little further. Or let me read up on that. It just doesn't quite seem right. And we have a whole generation of people that don't have that. So that's just one example of how the GOP likes to defund and then place the blame on the program itself and then be like, see, we were right. Let's defund it even more, instead of doing the smart thing and funding the schools, funding public education, giving them a lot of money, giving teachers a good salary, because their job is important. And the easy way to turn it around is funding. Just fund them. But apparently that's not important in this country because Republicans want us dumb. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. Like, share, subscribe, and vote, no matter how big, how small, how inconsequential, your vote matters. And read everything you can get your hands on. And I'll see you next time.